thanks to Prakash and Rotary for giving me this opportunity. So, talking about health impact of transportation is like going full circle, in the sense that it starts with our own human activity, which is the travel that all of us make, and our own choices of travel, which leads to the kind of externalities that we see around us, which then comes back and hits us back in terms of our health impact. The biggest irony is many times those who are the culprit of this impact are not the ones who bear the brunt of that impact. So that's the irony. Now, before I go into my thoughts, I just want to highlight that whatever knowledge and experience I have gained in understanding this complex subject is through some of the interesting projects that I have been doing, where it's a multidisciplinary approach. I have been collaborating with health experts, climate science experts, environmental engineering experts, economists, and so on through these projects, international collaborations, and trying to build this knowledge, taking case of Bangalore, our own city. While I do so, I'm basically, we have been adopting three pathways to understand the health impact. One is the exposure to humans due to the pollution. The other is the road traffic injuries, the burden of road traffic deaths. And third is the impact of the physical modes of transport, basically walking and cycling, and how all these together are creating health outcomes for all of us. And of course, for this, we have been using a lot of data, the non-travel activity data, travel data from Bangalore, taking the whole BMR, Bangalore Metropolitan Region, and also injury data. In fact, we have collected, all fatalities, FIRs of Bangalore for multiple years, and have been churning that to understand the fatality risk and who are the vulnerable road users. Now, while we do so, why health impact? Because it's an important indicator of livability, as you also mentioned in your closing remark, that it is the livability of cities that is a threat today. And how do we define livability? It's basically a sum of the factors that add to communities' quality of life, including the built-in natural environment, economic prosperity, social equity, health impact, educational opportunities, opportunities for cultural, recreational, and other possibilities. Now, on a more technical aspect, since transportation being a complex system, we really look into various dimensions of it affecting the whole travel choices and travel demand, considering all socioeconomic factors, the base year travel trends. Using that, we estimate base year emissions, use some travel demand models to estimate how the future emissions would look like, basically relying on estimating the vehicle kilometers traveled by all motorized modes and using emission factors. Let me go a little further. Now, why we are talking about exposure to pollution? And I must say, I'm sure all of us understand, it's a slow poison. Why? Because the effect of the sustained exposure of pollutants are not, realized immediately. You don't get that. The only thing is, when it actually hits your health, you would actually be at the point of no return. So we have to understand that it does impact all of us, people around us, our own near and dear ones, and something that we should not take it lightly. Now, PM 2.5 is the most killer among these air pollutants, particulate matter 2.5. And I thought this picture is the best way. It's not very clear, but still, best way to introduce PM 2.5. So if this is the size of a sand particle, and if this is the size of a hair, and if this is the size of a PM10, then this is what is the size of PM 2.5. So you can understand how small these particles and how deep they can go into your body. Now, what is so important about PM 2.5? As I said, these are particles of diameter less than 2.5 micrometers or less, and they are the ones who have most negative impact on human health. Is the major indicator of air pollution. A lot of studies use PM 2.5 as the main indicator, and it's for its association with the all-cause mortality. It's the 6th highest risk factor causing early death globally. If you look at the National Ambient Air Quality Standards of India, it prescribes the safe PM 2.5 concentration as 40 micrograms per meter cube. But actually WHO guidelines restrict it to 10 micrograms per meter cube. So our standard itself are much more diluted and substandard. Now if you go by the WHO guidelines, actually it's only 0.01% of population in India which lives in areas within the safe limit of this PM 2.5. That's the situation in which we are. This chart is quite clear to understand how PM 2.5 affects your different functions of the body. I'm sure if there are doctors who can explain it better. But if I try to summarize, short-term PM 2.5 exposure increases the possibility of cardiovascular diseases and respiratory diseases. And the long-term exposure can lead to lung cancer. This is what has been researched and reported. People living closer to busy roads, say within 300 meters, are susceptible to have higher level of these pollutant exposure. Now, whenever we come across, somebody around us with a life-threatening disease like lung cancer or something, it's general, tendency, societal tendency to blame it on their karma. उसने कुछ पाप किए होंगे तो इसलिए he got this lung cancer or those things. While it is partially true, the fact is it's not the individual karma, it's the collective karma. Our own travel choices and the way we make is actually leading to the situation of health impact. But as I said earlier also, that in many cases, people who are impacting that, who are causing that, are not the ones who are receiving that. So there is a question of environmental justice here. Which are the sections of the society which are impacted more as compared to some other people? Recently, I was in another event where they were launching air pollution monitors in different parts of the city, and one doctor in that meeting said that their hospital nowadays is receiving a lot of cases daily of heart attack among young people. And out of those young people, a majority of them are cab drivers. So this is one example how we are creating environmental injustice. So is it certain sections of society which are facing this brunt of the exposure to pollutants more as compared to others? You have to keep that in mind. And think about equity also. If you look at the world map of deaths as a result of ambient PM 2.5 in 2016, you would see India completely in red, dark red. Okay. Now what to do? As part of this Climatrans study, we have done a complete exercise of understanding whether the business as usual for Bangalore, the whole Bangalore metropolitan region is enough, or if that is not, then what can be done for Bangalore? So first we projected the business as usual to 2030, 2050. It's a complex mathematics, I'll not go into details of that, but when you look at these pictures, what you see is extremely congested situations in Bangalore in the business as usual scenario as we go in future, and based on what we have done so far and nothing more to be done. What we also estimated is how the vehicle kilometers traveled in the city would increase or decrease over time by all motorized modes, and you will see almost 130% increase in the total vehicle kilometers traveled by motorized mode in the business as usual scenario, which means if you have more kilometers traveled, you would also have more fossil fuel consumption and also more exhaust emissions. This is not a clear situation in which Bangalore can be a better livable city in future based on the business as usual. We also translated this in terms of how the pollutants, coming from exhaust emissions of tailpipe, would change in this business as usual scenario. And you would see as we go further in future, you would, for example, have CO2 increasing by 2000% and PM increasing by more than 100%. this is not something that the city, you can call it as more livable in the future. So something has to be done. Now, while looking at what has to be done, we essentially focus on bundles of measures. I keep saying this, there is no single bullet for this kind of problem. You have to have bundles of measures which would have right kind of effect, which is, in basic language, we call it as push and pull effect. Which modes of transport we want to discourage and people push out of them, and which modes of transport and mobility we want to attract people towards and encourage. This is how we should have bundles of strategies which would enable us to achieve this push and pull. So what we did was, we arrived at, through an extensive process, we arrived at different bundles of measures that we can try and evaluate for Bangalore. Now when you look at this bundle, what this talks about is not just increasing. Now interestingly, you will not see any measure here talking about even adding an extra kilometer length of road in the city, even for 2030 and 2050. And we have also taken projections of population up to 3 crores being absorbed. In spite of increase in travel demand, how we can still make this city more livable. So we tried this, for example, this bundle 3, it is not just talking about increasing and improving public transport, walking, cycling, but is also talking about, for example, encouraging carpooling and high occupancy vehicle lanes, introducing congestion charging, park and ride, mixed land use policies, and so on. We also tried, EV option where all buses and cars would start running on electricity. Besides all these policies in bundle 3. And what we get in terms of impact, now first is this push and pull effect. Are we able to change the mode share towards the modes that we are trying to encourage? What we see from this bundle 3 is we are able to increase the mode share of bus, metro, cycle and walk, and decrease the mode share of car, two-wheeler, auto rickshaw. So we certainly get a good push and pull. You need to have these combinations of measure to achieve this. What we also found was the vehicle kilometers traveled come down, and we also see that the mitigation potential of this kind of measure is humongous. You can, as compared to BAU, you can bring your pollutants down by this much percentage in 2030 and 2050. Now, the second pathway, the road traffic injuries. Now, this is not just an issue. I don't think, if you look at the statistics, and if some of you, that we generally we have about 400 people dying on our roads every day. We don't even blink our eyes. Every day, it's like one jumbo jet crash happening in the country. This is the state of road traffic injuries. So it is not just an issue, it's actually a health hazard, and that too of epidemic proportion in the country. So this is another externality, extreme externality of transportation system that we are facing. And the biggest irony is the young age group is the most vulnerable, not just in India, but worldwide also. It's such an irony, and especially in India, when you have a large, population in a young and productive age, and maximum people dying in that age. It's really an unfortunate situation. And out of all the deaths happening, the lower and middle income countries are contributing to 90% of those deaths. Now, what we did was, from the data that we collected for Bangalore, we first did the vulnerable road user analysis, just focusing on fatalities. That means accidents where people have died. And what to see is pedestrians and two-wheelerists constitute almost 95% of the deaths. 95% of the deaths. Okay. Yeah, I'll quickly finish here. We also try to discern which are the offender vehicles. So you will see, for example, heavy vehicles are causing more of two-wheeler, deaths, and also pedestrian deaths. Pedestrians are being hit and dying because of two-wheelers and cars. So this kind of analysis helps us understand what is really happening in terms of the deaths and where to hit and control these things. So we ran some scenarios of how, if we change the motorization levels of different modes, it will have impact on fatalities, reduction or increase. So what we found was, if we have a high bus scenario where the mode share of buses in terms of passenger kilometer, total passenger kilometer, if it increases substantially, we are getting a maximum reduction in the fatal cases. Similarly, we also found that if the two-wheeler levels increases, so if you have a high two-wheeler scenario, the fatalities are actually increasing. Okay, so we need to somehow balance out, reduce the two-wheeler trips, passenger kilometer trips being made, and try focusing on high bus scenario, and also the cyclist and pedestrian scenario, which is also leading to reduction in fatalities. So what we get from this is fatalities can be reduced with promotion of sustainable transport system. We get a double impact, not just in terms of cleaning our environment, but also making the travel more safer for all road users. I'll quickly finish. Our ringmaster is showing me the finger. The third part is the physical activity. What is the impact of doing more walking and cycling? Now, physical inactivity. What are the health problems associated with? Is you can see in this chart. What we can summarize is, presently, if you look at 30% of all adult population worldwide do not perform sufficient physical activity as it is required. Globally average, 13% of world's productive population are overweight, about 9% in India. And if you see the proportion of walking and cycling, it has been declining consistently in India. What has been generally recommended is we should have at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity. And what this possibly can lead to is lower all-cause mortalities, and also decrease incidences of depression, high blood pressure, stroke, disease, type 2 diabetes, breast cancer, and so on. And it also helps to boost reducing congestion and make the environment more safer and cleaner. Again, taking the data, travel data of Bangalore, what we could see was there are at least 35% of people who are performing low physical activity, okay, who have chances of those kind of ailments, health-related problems happening, and still there are 52% who are only doing moderate physical activity. So, but the irony is, while people take on walking and cycling, the increased risk associated with walking and cycling, especially in a high motorized scenario, is that they are both exposed more to pollutants and the fatality risk, and which negates the benefits of active transportation. So while we promote walking and cycling, we also need to ensure that the motorized vehicles reduces, so that they are not seen as freedom fighters, just trying to kill themselves by doing some activism by adopting. So to conclude, we really need a bundle of measures which would bring a combination of strategies to achieve a more livable situation and a sustainable transport system for the city. Studies support that we can reduce these disability adjusted life years, we call it as dailies, by significantly increasing usage of safe and active transport and reducing the exposure to PM 2.5. And fatalities of these vulnerable road users can be brought down by promoting public transportation. To conclude, what I would really like to say is, today, transportation planning should no more be just about removing the congestion points and reducing the volume to capacity ratio, which is how the traditional transport planning has always worked. We also need to reduce the total vehicle kilometers traveled by all motorized modes, and also reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Eventually, it should lead to more livable Indian cities. Thank you.